focus on two different experiences, one in the West, France, one in the East, Russia, both of which have profound influence on the necessity and creation of Zionism. Why is a course on anti-Semitism now looking at Zionism? Because today, in my opinion, the most dangerous new anti-Semitism is from the left, and it has to do with Israel and their statement that Zionism and Israel are inherently at the foundation imperialist, colonialist, and racist. They don't read history critically. So we began with definitions and data. Then we looked at text in scripture. Then we looked at medieval Christian anti-Semitism. Just 3 examples. Now we go to the late 18th, 19th century, skipping another 450 years. Why? Because what happens in France and what happens in the pogroms of Russia is a warning that will come true in 50 years later in the Shoah, 40 years later. It's important, if you're going to defend Jews and Jewish life, that you not be caught in having to explain the modern evaluation of Israeli policy. Anti-Zionism should not be discussed unless you understand today's session. People can and should criticize the state of Israel and its governance and its military. Fine, great. They should not suggest Israel has no right to exist. Big difference. Israel is an occupying, abusive governance. Okay? Debauchery. Israel has not done all it could to create a better life for Palestinians. Okay? Debauchery. Israel has no right to be a Jewish state. Now, do not answer that question. Because if you get involved in that conversation, you've already lost. So, in France, the Dreyfus affair, the single most important example of what Jews thought they would never face. 1787, 100 years before Dreyfus, Napoleon, called together the meeting of the Great Sanhedrin and said to the Jews of France, do you want to be Jews or French? Excuse me? I don't understand the question, because it's not a question that had ever been asked before. 100 years later, the Jews of France were completely, thoroughly assimilated. And that is where we meet Alfred Dreyfus. Luciana, can you put the Dreyfus material up for me, please? (1859 to 1935). He is a French Jewish military officer. I might, in fact, say he was a Jewish French military officer, in which French is the primary noun and Jewish the adjective, who was wrongfully tried. Bring it down a little for me, Luciana. So the Dreyfus Affair became one of the most significant political events in French history, European history, and Jewish history. Without the Dreyfus Affair, there is no Zionism. Because Theodor Herzl, an assimilated Jew from Vienna, was a journalist covering the trial. Two assimilated Jews who are shocked that Western assimilated, enlightened European culture would do this. Look, we can't imagine in the 21st century what it's like. Could you imagine? There was a member of the Supreme Court who was Jewish, Fuchs, right? Okay. What would you think if somehow Fuchs was exposed as being involved in the Petrobras corruption? And he is publicly impeached, sent to prison. And people don't believe it. And the newspapers in Sao Paulo and Rio investigate, and they find a conspiracy. You can't imagine what that might look like. That is what happened to Alfred Dreyfus. Can you put up the trial of the century, Luciana? Here is a wonderful review of a very important book. Go down, go down. So wait. Go back to the illustration. Here is the front page of the most important magazine in all of France. And it shows Dreyfus, after the trial, being publicly humiliated. This is not a private event. This is public and communal. I can't stress that enough. This is not anti-Semitism behind doors. This is anti-Semitism in the prasa, in the tribunais. Take it down for me. To the middle or so. Mais. Wait. Go back up a little. Go down. More. Go. More. More. Wait. Little bit more. Okay. It's important that you understand that Herzl was there. Herzl was reporting on a trial. It's not dissimilar from Hannah Arendt reporting on the trial in Jerusalem of Eichmann. Trials provide journalists with more than a story. They provide a relationship to the facts, to the history, and to the communal mood. Look at what he writes. 3 readings of the affair, all by Jews, have long contested its meaning. Herzl's, which gave birth to modern Zionism. Herzl had been present at the degradation on that January day. As a journalist, he writes, it has been established that justice could be refused to a Jew for the sole reason that he is a Jew. This insight, repeated and made programmatic in the Zionist project, was seemingly vindicated by what happened during the Second World War. When do you know that your role as a citizen is being threatened? Anybody who has had family in Europe, 1935, 36, 37, 38, 39, when would you know? Herzl is the first to ask that question. And it motivates him to write Der Judenstaat. Do not translate that as the Jewish state. It's the Jew state. It is his imagination of how Jews should establish their identity beyond dependence of being guests everywhere. Zionism, the experience of Western assimilated Jews realizing that their assimilation is flawed. They will never be fully accepted. Take it down a little, please, Luciana. Little further, please. Herzl's reading, that right there, was that the affair marked the end of a credible idea of assimilation. Marcel Proust was that it marked the end of a credible idea of aristocracy. Dreyfus Affair acts as a kind of earthquake in remembrance of things past, destroying Proust's belief in a natural merger of the educated middles, mostly Jewish. Proust's ideal was the aesthetic version of the progressive dream. How do you know when all that you have trusted is wrong? This was someone who had given his entire career to serving the French Republic. This was not an entrepreneur, not a politician, not an intellect. So make sure you understand, Herzl, an assimilated Jew from Vienna, experiences the trial of Alfred Dreyfus, an assimilated Jew in Paris. And his experience, after especially Émile Zola, creates the most famous headline in all historical journalism, J'accuse. You can't think about this from 2021 without Auschwitz being in your mind. But if we had not yet had Auschwitz, if we did not yet know that the worst we could imagine could happen, Zionism is not a project of nationalism. It is a project anchored in the reality. We gave our best for the last 500 years. They don't want us. Luciana, take it down a little bit more. 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 Maybe I missed it up above. I'm looking for, go back up, maybe halfway. He has an extraordinary, yes, go a little bit more. More. About a middle, Luciana. He describes the issues of anti-Semitism perfectly. More. 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 I'm sorry, class. Here, wait. More. 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 Maybe here it is. A little bit more. Yes. There it is. If anti-Semitism, down a little. Down a little. Here, there it is. If anti-Semitism, down a little bit more. Nope, back up. I'm sorry, Luciana, back up. It starts if anti-Semitism. That's the paragraph I want. One more. One more. And there it is. If anti-Semitism did start the Dreyfus affair, it fueled it, fed it, kept it going. The accusation was first kept secret, but as soon as it was made public, the secrecy itself became an occasion. The army was protecting a traitor Jew. First, loudest, nastiest among the explicitly anti-Semitic enemies. Jewish France, 1880s. Drumon's book was above all an anti-immigrant manifesto. When you have, as we do globally, problems about 65 million refugees, immigrants trying to get anywhere safe. You have people who don't want new people, don't want strangers, don't want difference, which is where we get the word xenophobia. Fear of what is strange and different. He was responding to the waves of Jewish immigrants from Germany and Eastern Europe who had arrived in France during the previous 20 years. Bringing with them, he argued, values and a faith alien to Christian France. There it is, the link to what we studied the previous week. Remember what Haman said. There is a certain people that lives among you whose laws, they don't accept what we accept. Dreyfus met every standard of being more French than Jewish, but he was different. He could not be trusted. 1 minute, Jacqueline. In a tone familiar with today's anti-Muslim polemics, using the usual toxic cocktail of inflated numbers, hysterical overstatement, guilt by association, Drumont managed to convince the readers that France's real crisis was the decline of Christianity. Take it down a little, Luciana. This had happened under the demoralizing pressure, modern art and culture, which of course was Jewish culture. We're called cosmopolitan. We're always modern. It seemed perfectly natural, a heartbreaking irony, to suspect that Jews would sell out to France to their spiritual home of Germany. This paragraph is not too different than my attempt last week to explain the blood libel. There's enough truth to make people listen, but it is absolutely false and distorted, so that when people are afraid, when people don't know a Jew, they will accept the stereotype, add 2 and 2, and always get 5. Always. Wherefore Voltaire, the Jews had been evil as a relic of antiquity. For Dumas, they were evil as a herald of modernity. In other words, if you don't like the Jew, you can find any justification for your dislike. They can be clannish, live only with themselves, and at the same time, trying to infiltrate every place you live. They can be wealthy beyond imagination, and at the same time, cheap, always cheating you out of money. The anti-Semite puts the Jew in both positions of extremes. I'm emphasizing Dreyfus proves to us, says Herzl, says Aleph Dalet Gordon, assimilation has failed. If you read Luther's last 4 sermons inside the 16th, 17th, 18th century, they're ugly and nasty. If you read them backwards from the 21st century, they're a terrifying prophecy. Herzl wrote Der Judenstaat, created the World Zionist Congress, created the first meeting of the World Zionist Congress. Because the West, not Russia, the West had offered a promise, and the promise failed. Dreyfus would be ultimately cleared. They would prove that Dreyfus was innocent, had been falsely accused, that the prosecutor, many of the people involved, were in fact anti-Semites. But by that time, he had already spent time on Devil's Island, and the Jew had become publicly humiliated in the most cultured, assimilated city of Western Europe. This is before World War I. So I want you to imagine what it would be like if the Jewish judge on the Supreme Court in Brasilia was falsely accused, taken out into public, and people in Sao Paulo, in Rio, Porto Alegre, started accusing Jews of destroying Brazil, what would you do? How long before you would think it's not safe? Political Zionism. Theodore Herzl's political Zionism is anchored in the Dreyfus Affair, which itself followed 15 years of pogroms in Eastern Europe. But we don't start with the pogroms. We start with Dreyfus. Zionism is an answer to the failure of the West. So when people today attack Israel as a colonialist, imperialist, racist project, which intended to take away from the Palestinians, you need to be able to explain to them, no. Zionism is anchored in anti-Semitism in both the West and the East before the Holocaust. The idea of Israel is not merely simply an answer to Auschwitz. There was 35 years of Zionism and a momentum of Jewish reality before Kristallnacht, before Auschwitz. But we couldn't get out and we couldn't get in. So, anti-Semitism had always been a part of Europe. That's what we studied last week. But Janetchi, please turn off your microphone. Janetchi. Thank you. But something happens different in this unique trial in Paris. Look at the middle of this paragraph. The more eagerly a Jew attempted to escape from Judaism, the more Jewish he revealed himself to be. A snaky shapeshifter with no allegiances to anything except clan. Difficult for you to imagine this event. I want to ask Francois, who is in Paris tonight, what it's like for Jews who grow up in France to understand Dreyfus. How do you learn about Dreyfus? Francois. How do you learn about Dreyfus growing up as a Jew in France?
First of all, I didn't learn about Dreyfus in school. I think this is a point. We don't.
This tells you a lot.
Yes. So we do know about Dreyfus if you really want to know about history. So searching, and normally there have been many movies about this, and maybe about J'accuse, or the famous J'accuse. And if you really want to know about it, I think you have to insist about studying, because it's not clear. You don't have this information. If you don't know, if you don't want, you don't know anything about this.
Okay, so thank you. could not have asked for a better answer. Here becomes the single most important issue in pushing against anti-Semitism. Ignorance. Ignorance is the simple, benign, people don't hate you, they don't know you. People aren't trying to hate you, they don't know you, don't have access to know you, and don't know your history. So if someone says in the passionate, charismatic ideology of the left, look at what those white capitalist Israelis are doing to those poor black and brown Palestinians, it becomes a repetition of the ideology all over the world. And you, oh, wait. Zionism did not begin with the purpose and intent of destroying Palestinian life. Oh, no, don't do that. Next question. Whose responsibility is it to teach our history? My responsibility? Or should France teach this as part of their own history? In the same way, Brazil should be teaching about slavery and the Atlantic slave trade as part of their own history. Francois.
I just want to say, I left France many, many years ago, and I don't know anymore about program at school. So maybe I can even check this with somebody here, but I really don't know. Maybe it's it has been taught here. I don't know. So I will check for you, and I will tell you next lesson. Okay.
So here you have a public trial that becomes the political scandal of the turn of the century. We move from the 19th to the 20th century. You have Proust, Zola. You have the great public celebrities, intellectuals. How many of you, as Jews, did not understand the role of Dreyfus and the origins of Zionism? You all understood it. Great, fabulous. But you must use your knowledge about Dreyfus and anti-Semitism directly in explaining that Israel did not begin as a nationalist, imperialist, racist project. Let's look at pogroms. Okay, the word pogrom is a Russian word. The Russian royal reality decided to control the Jews by forcing them to live in the Pale. In the soft underbelly, the Ukraine, Bessarabia, what became the shtetl life. Required army service, Discupi, at 13 years old. Many of you who have grandparents and great-grandparents who came, fled the Ukraine, will hear stories of parents who sent their 12 and 13-year-old sons out of the country for fear that they would be forced to go into the army, completely assimilated, converted, and made non-Jews. The East was still a dynastic royal hierarchy, did not have what France and Germany and Vienna had. The Enlightenment had not come to the East. Let's read it down. The term was first used to refer to outbreaks of anti-Jewish violence by non-Jewish street mobs, 1881 to 1884. That is the same year mass migration to the West, Jews to North and South America, began. Between 1881 and 1920, 2.3 million Eastern European Jews came to North America. I don't know how many came to Latin America, but a large group. Anti-Semitism forced refugee immigration. We could not live stable Jewish lives because of violence, forced assimilation, forced relocation. The Anti-Defamation League, the oldest defense organization in the West, was created in response to the Chmielnicki pogroms. What am I trying to offer you? The facts that even 20 years before Dreyfus, the non-assimilated East was forcing Jews by the millions to leave. Eastern European anti-Semitism, Eastern European lack of integration and assimilation fostered the values of Zionism, religious Zionism, so-called practical Zionism, Aleph Dalet Gordon, Ahad Ha'am, other Jewish thinkers who, once the idea of political Zionism came up, they all recognized this is not going to work. Luciana, bring the text down for me. Most of the original pogroms took place in an area that became known as the Pale of Settlement, a territory the Russian Empire acquired between 1791 and 1835. The Russian government forbade its new subjects from settling in Russian territory outside the Pale, an area that included Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldavia, and Poland. And an 1821 attack in Odessa, considered by many the first pogrom, though most cite 1881. Bring it down for me, please. Many individuals were beaten and murdered. In 1881, pogroms occurred in Kiev and Odessa. When you had pogroms in the rural areas, They were smaller. Many of you have stories in your family of a village the week before Easter when Cossacks riding horses would ride through a village, ransacking Jewish businesses, the synagogue, raping Jewish women, beating and killing the men. It was considered an instantaneous, a spontaneous act of violence. Here's the next question. Did the government support pogroms? Bring it down, Luciana, please. Historians disagree about the degree to which the government may have been involved. The official response was slow. Only after days of violence did the police and military intervene to restore order. Let's assume that some of the violence was simply Cossacks, simply people who hated Jews. The government did not protect the Jews, nor did the government stop the Cossacks. Most of the people involved in rural pogroms in the Pale were poor, did not participate in the society at large. These were the people who left, came to the West, and then had to leave this culture behind. Yiddish, many of them left observant traditional Judaism, and they became Jews in an entirely new way. Fiddler on the Roof, parrots, the Yiddish stories that we romanticize, Shalom Aleichem, represent something that now we kind of look at and go, oh. If you know real Jewish history, then you realize no one ever left Anatevka singing. Unlike the Dreyfus affair that involved one Jew, the pogroms involved thousands of Jews. In France, the fear was at the top of the assimilation. The pogroms were in the street. The fear, the threat of being violently hurt, even killed. Anti-Semitism in assimilated France, anti-Semitism in the Russian royal, not yet communist, dynastic rural areas. Both realities fed the need for Zionism. Neither reality has anything to do with nationalism, imperialism, or the racist eradication of Palestinians. Luciana, take the paper down for me, please. The main inspiration of these vicious attacks was the ideology of anti-Semitism, which blamed Jews for weakened economic conditions political instability, and Jews murdered Jesus, the blood libel, Jews murdered Christian babies and baked their blood into the matzah. What we studied last week about Christian Europe still existed in late 19th century Russia, Poland, Ukraine. You are not going to find a Zionism that is ideologically represented by the discourse of the left. I am the first one in line to argue about Netanyahu, Sharon, the problems of occupation. Great. But if you are a student of actual Jewish history, then Zionism begins with Dreyfus and the pogroms. Bring down the paper, please. You notice in 1882, the May laws. Go back up just 2 sentences. Luciana, go back up 2 sentences, please, before we get there. No, go back up. Go back up. There it is. Wait. Down a little. Down a little. I'm sorry. One more page. One more page. There. Wait. There. The back up 1 paragraph. There it is. Wait. Stop. The May laws, which restricted where Jews could settle, forbade non-Jews from issuing mortgages to Jews, prohibited Jews from conducting business on Sundays. You must understand, prior to the Holocaust, there was a completely anti-Semitic instability to Eastern Europe, where the vast majority of Jews live. Pogroms and the May laws represent the historical fact of why Jews became refugees to the West. And when they couldn't get out to the West, why they understood that Zionism was a necessity. Druma wrote about Jews running away from the May laws. You will not replace us, is what the right has said in Charlottesville in 2017. You will not replace us. That began when Jews ran away from the May laws. Luciana, take it down, please. Now, how did Jews respond? So here's what I want you to look at this. Wait, go back up to the picture. Go back up to the picture. Here it is. Very famous picture. The Jew who attempts to take care of themselves. Look at the 1905 Kishinev pogrom. This is the Jew. First of all, look at how the Jew is characterized. Long white beard, big nose. Look at what they're carrying. Notice the nature of what Jews look like early 20th century. This is 1 year before the First World Zionist Congress, before World War I, 30 years before the Nuremberg laws in Nazi Germany. You notice the assimilated man and the king. Jews always manipulate power through wealth. So in defending white Ashkenazi Israel, the left does not want to acknowledge this picture or the history behind this picture. Take the paper down, please, Luciana. Pogroms continued to occur 1903, 1906, Kishinev. The Zionist poet Chaim Nachman Bialik wrote his famous poem, City of Slaughter. 2,500 Jews dead in Odessa. The violence of Odessa, 10 years after Dreyfus. When would you know you are not welcome where your family has lived for 500 years? That's what Jews in Germany and Austria wondered in 35, 36, 37, 38. The two rabbis that founded liberal congregations, Rio, Sao Paulo, the World Union of Progressive Judaism, Lady Montague. When would you know it's over? The pogroms make it look like an easier question. Dreyfus makes it look more confusing. Okay, bring the paper down, Luciana. Here, look at this picture. 1946. This is 1 year after the end of World War II. How do Jews take care of themselves when no one will help take care of them? So we are challenged as being clannish, only wanting to live with other Jews. Our history teaches us when we live among other people, we're alone and vulnerable. Take the paper down, Luciana, please. Is the term pogrom still used? Take it down just a little. 1991, Jewish media referred to the Crown Heights riots. 2008 used the term to describe Jewish settlers' attack on Palestinians in Hebron. I think the word pogrom is still an important word. But if you talk to people on the left who are describing the nationalism, the Jewish imperialist, racist attitude toward Palestinians, they do not know the word pogrom. What I'm emphasizing is that the pogrom, like Dreyfus, comes before Auschwitz. that Zionism became our self-critical awareness that whether we lived in the East or we lived in the West, that experiment was not going to work. And of course, we know 38, 39, 40, 41, it's too late. No place to go. They won't let us leave. No place to enter. So Zionism becomes post-Auschwitz. Zionism becomes our determining our own destiny based on a reality that no one helped us. It's an exaggeration. Some people helped us. But we couldn't leave and we couldn't enter, and there was no place determined by us. Before the 20th century, pogroms in Russia. Very end of the 19th century, Alfred Dreyfus. These events, which are actual historical reality, explain Zionism before we knew what the world would do. So I want to stop, because when I thought about creating this class, and they were only giving me 6 sessions, I wondered where to put this conversation. And I determined that it had to go before we studied the Holocaust. The Holocaust confirms what Dreyfus and the pogroms thought might happen. But it's so extreme. So today is a risk. I'm trying to teach you to imagine a time when we knew we were hated, but we did not yet know we could be hated and exterminated. That becomes a very important self-realization. That Zionism as an idea is stimulated by that moment. I'm hated, I don't belong, but I don't yet believe they will exterminate me. That's a difficult intellectual idea in 2021. Jacqueline.
Rabbi, hello everybody. Sorry for being late too. I got the point of the lesson today, and I bring it to 2021, June 21st, as a coincidence, right? And we are facing these in Brazil. I myself believe so. I don't know, you Brazilians, how you feel about being Jewish in this polarized environment where Jews are against Jews in terms of being on the right side on the left side, whatever side we are not safe if you don't get together. But what I'm really getting that we are not aware about the risk that you are taking yet. You know, we think that we are able to protect ourselves because government is Israeli friendly, Israel as a geopolitical state, not as human beings living there as Jewish people with all the pluralism we are together, right? We know that, but I don't know if these people that say that our friends, they know about that and they like us the way we are, plural. You know, sometimes you do not like each other because you are different. Can you imagine, as Jewish people? So what you are telling me, it's bringing a kind of not to despair, but awareness that you should not trust this government.
Well,
Any
wait,
government. But wait. Any government that has an authoritarianism soul, if I can tell, you know, a trained, a vector, whatever name it is, where you don't have democracy, we are at risk. That's it.
So let me just use the word trust. I do not want to give you reason to despair that you are unsafe. I'm trying to teach you history with an example that you must always be vigilant. You must realize that every relationship a Jew has ever had historically is fragile and delicate. I don't know that we've yet reached a point where we should say we don't trust. There's an article today in Haaretz that I will pass on to Luciana that studies Brazil as the #1 country in the world which is most Aliyah friendly. More than Argentina, more than North America. I asked a member of Ilana's family, young man, very involved in Chazit, do the youth movements, and Chiago's involved in Shomer, do the youth movements teach Zionism or push for Aliyah? The two are not the same. Is the goal of being a part of Dror, Chazit, Shomer, to learn how to be a Jew here, anywhere, to figure out how to have both? Or is the ideal to make Aliyah? That you are not yet a full Jew until and unless you make Aliyah. That's a different set of questions than the original Zionist asked. Do we have a Zionism today that has anything to do with the Zionism of early 20th century? No, not at all. That Zionism had not yet imagined the Shoah. Are the Jews who are now divided between Israel and the diaspora, are they equal in the level of their Jewish identity? Jacqueline says no. Are the Jews who live in Israel more Jewish? No. Not for me. Zionism has not yet, in my opinion, readopted a sense of purpose for how Jews who choose to live in the diaspora. I have thought consciously, what would it mean to live in Israel? I chose not to, for lots of different reasons on 3 different occasions. But making Aliyah is different than Zionism. Zionism in the 21st century is different than Zionism in between World War I and World War II.
And how is Zionism nowadays for you?
We're going to get there. 1 minute, just 1 minute. So I don't disagree that Jacqueline says we should be aware. Cuidado. It's what Ilana has tried to engage since the first time I met her. And I was visiting almost 10 years ago. I met her and she said, foreigners should learn Rio paranoia. Don't walk on the street carrying your iPhone as if nothing could happen. Don't take out your wallet in a crowded place and be unaware of the people around you. I grew up in San Francisco, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, Chicago, Minneapolis. Not one of the places I lived and grew up and raised my children did I ever say, oh, wait, there's a Chicago paranoia. There's a Minneapolis paranoia. There were neighborhoods you didn't go to. But as long as you didn't go to those neighborhoods, so as long as I'm in Zona Sul, do I have to call Jacqueline to teach me where it's safe in Salvador? I have my congregants in Maringá say, Rabbi, we'll pick you up here, we'll take you there, don't go here. Okay. Zionism is like teaching every generation, where's it safe? How do you live? And when should you be afraid? I don't want to go so far as to say we shouldn't trust. Because once we don't trust, you need to move. And by the way, at this moment, I don't think Rio, New York, where my children live in America, Minneapolis, Florida, or Jerusalem, I think they're all equally unsafe. All of them. No place in the world is safe. You choose the problem. So, what I've tried to do today is give you the roots of Zionism, specifically as it relates to anti-Semitism. Zionism is not a political, social, cultural idea that comes out of nowhere. Zionism is an answer to being hated. Today, Zionism helps us better cope with fear. We asked Thiago in Maringá to help us with our younger children so they will be connected to a youth movement with other Jews. We do so the young Jews who don't go to school with other Jews, who don't live with more Jews, will with Chiago know something in Shomer Hatzayir. So they will be confident. They will learn Jewish songs. They will learn Jewish dances. They will experience confident Jewish lives. Confidence is our answer to being afraid. Fear makes someone feel inadequate, makes them draw away from the experience of being vital. When I work with someone who chooses Judaism, at some point I always ask, what will you do when someone it's going to happen eventually. If someone is a woman and she's marrying a Jew, I will always ask, and what will you do when your child is hurt or hated as a Jew? Fear stops someone from living their potential. Fear today is very different than in Paris during Dreyfus, in Odessa, Kiev. We cannot imagine fear today without thinking of the Holocaust. Simply not possible. So today was an intellectual experiment that I don't think I can do for more than 90 minutes. What was it like to try to be a Jew when you knew that you were unacceptable, but you did not already think they'll exterminate all of us? I was in Paris in 1970, summer of 1970, on my way to study in Israel. And I was standing on Bastille Day among French. And the Arc de Triomphe had the tricolor hanging Bastille Day. And I was talking to French students. And on the Champs-Élysées, there's nothing but a military parade. And I said to one of the French students, wait a minute, weren't you just rioting at the Sorbonne? Yes. Well, why are you standing here today? Ah, he said, do you see that flag hanging under the Arc de Triomphe? My parents and grandparents saw the swastika hanging and the Nazis marching. I may riot at the Sorbonne because I'm left, but today we celebrate being French. Zionism today is not about the possibility of a Jewish state. Today we celebrate 73 years of Israel as a reality, in defiance of. We told you at the pogroms, we told you in Paris, we told you in Germany, we kept telling you, and it happened anyway. So when we dance Israeli dances, When we see an Israeli flag, we are not nationalists. We're not racists. We are seeing the hope, which is why the Israeli national anthem is called Hatikva. Zionism after the Holocaust, not at its beginnings, requires the possibility of Jews doing more than surviving. Dreyfus and the pogroms are a warning. We didn't understand the warning. What is Zionism today? It depends on how old you are, where you're learning it. Janetti might know a dear friend of Ilana's, Sylvia Klein, who took her then 96-year-old mother and they made Aliyah. We had a friend for dinner Saturday, Betsy Adler, and Betsy said that during the Gaza conflict, Sylvia, who lives in Kfar Saba with her nieces, hid under the stairs because there was no room to run in. Sylvia took my children when they visited Rio for the first time, no centro, downtown, to Sardine Alley, famous half street where Jews, Arabs, okay. My kids cried. Sylvia is almost 70 years old. She lives alone. Her mother died at 101 in a lot. And she hid alone under the stairs in a little apartment in Kfar Saba. Zionism is understanding what Jews are willing to do in order just to be Jews. Not nationalism. I don't want Palestinian children killed. I don't want buildings destroyed. I want Sylvia Klein not to have to hide alone under the stairs. In the same way that Jews in Odessa, Kishinev, Paris, Berlin, how do you describe that reality to someone who is angry at Israel from the left? The anti-Semitism I've been teaching you is primarily from the right. Today, the more dangerous anti-Semitism, in my opinion, is coming from the left. And it's coming from both. And that's new. And in Estados Unidos, in Brazil, in Argentina, when it's coming from both places, muito perigoso.
For example, Iran, you consider from the left or from the right?
I think when you're dealing with the ideology of Iran, you're dealing with a unique Persian Muslim ideological hatred. When you're dealing with Hamas and Hezbollah, you're dealing with two groups that have written in their charter, our purpose is to destroy the Jewish state. There's nothing they can give us. There's no negotiation. We don't want them. That's different than Dreyfus, different than pogroms. There's nothing to discuss when someone begins the conversation with, you should not exist.
It's true.
So I'm trying to give you today the history of assimilated France and non-assimilated Eastern Europe. Both produced, the anti-Semitism that provoked, Zionism as a need to depend only on ourselves. And that is the final message. Zionism was supposed to be the answer before the Nazis. After the Nazis, there's no conversation. Now we know they will really exterminate us.
Good
So,
point.
we start with definitions and data. Then we look at scripture. Then we look at what Christian Europe did. Today, we look at just two examples, just two, of why we could no longer believe. I'll use Jacqueline's word now. We could no longer trust that Europe would be safe. The tragedy is too many people did trust it for too long, and we were given no options. And when you're given no options, the rabbis in the Talmud say, "Ala chat kama v'chama v'chol shechem." How much the more so? Okay, we'll be on our own. Thanks. We'll have our own country. Next week, we will look at the Holocaust as the final confirmation of what anti-Semitism is capable. At no point prior to the building of the first death camp is there anything I've taught you that would lead you to believe that a civilization would take money and time to destroy all Jews. 6 million was not the goal. All Jews were going to be victims. Ate logo. Any questions before we leave?
Rabbi, say again the Talmud thing that you said.
Alachat kama v'chama v'chol shechem. How much the more so? Alachat kama v'chama v'chol shechem. Thank you for studying with me.
Thank you for teaching us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Obrigado, Rabino.